Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Barbara Livingston, the president of the Carmel Residents Association. On behalf of our board of directors, I welcome you warmly to the Shape of Water on the Monterey Peninsula. I want to acknowledge that Carmel Mayor Steve Dallas is here with us, and Carmel Councilwoman Carolyn Hardy. We thank them for being here. And Jan Reimers is here, Councilwoman Jan Reimers. Thank you, Jan. Today we are going to be submitting written questions of our speakers. On my right is George Riley from Public Water Now. On my left, Kevin Tilden of Cal-Am, and you'll be meeting Dave Stoltz in just a minute. So we have a cadre of lovely CRA women who will be collecting questions from you. So just raise your hand at any point during the presentations, and they'll come running to get your questions and bring them forward to the moderator. You have a question now? Oh, you have a question. You have a question. You have a question I'm going to pick up right over here. I want to thank Dick Stiles for setting up the room, and Barry and Kathleen Swift for once again hosting our wine service. We encourage you to stay for wine following the meeting, and hope that you'll do that. If there are some who are not yet members of the CRA and you live in the village or its sphere of influence, we have membership applications, copies of our newsletter, The Voice, and a little flyer all about us on the wine table. You might want to take something home and read. One of the benefits of CRA membership is the opportunity now to participate in our straw polls. We conducted one recently about the proliferation of wine tasting rooms in the village, and the overwhelming response was no more wine tasting rooms. We're currently conducting a straw poll about whether the city should spend $176,000 as its share of the Monterey County Convention and Visitor Bureau effort to bring tourism to this area. And that poll is just now being taken, and we urge those of you who are CRA members to respond as soon as possible, please. Georgina Armstrong is my prompter. Georgina. Oh yeah, I'd like to remind members also of CRA Dines Out on February 21st at the Cypress Inn. The dinners are $40 each. Checks are payable to CRA and may be mailed to Darlene Mosley at Box 1135 Carmel with your choice of entree. So refer to your copy of The Voice for entrees.
It's on the newsletter, yes.
And it's on the newsletter, yes, and it's also on our website. And speaking of our website, we've just redone our website, and it is gorgeous. And one of the interesting features is something called Just In. So we're going to try and keep that up to date with timely tidbits of information for you to know about. Georgina? The CRA published a book last year called Stories of Old Carmel, and it's a delightful compilation of events and personalities which shaped Carmel by the Sea as we know it today. And I've given copies of this now to our speakers, George, Kevin, and Dave. Now, one of you in the room today, on the back of your program, has the number 1, and that person will get a copy of the book. But not a board member, please. But anyone else? Who has it? Who has it? And the name?
Anna Thompson.
Wonderful.
I really wanted that book. Thank you.
You know, it's available. This Darling book is available at River House Books, at Pilgrim's Way in Carmel, Carmel Bay Company, and the Carmel Drug Store. Oh yes, and listen, will you stay after the program? Would you help by stacking the chairs and help Dick? It'll speed everything up so much faster. And now, that's it. And so now I'd like to turn the meeting over to Dave Stoltz of the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District. And Dave is going to give an impartial overview of the water situation on the Monterey Peninsula. He will then introduce George Riley. We have just flipped a coin to determine order of speakers. George won the flip, so he will start first, and then followed by Kevin. Since Kevin will have an opportunity to rebut George, we thought then following Kevin's presentation, George would have the opportunity to briefly rebut anything that Kevin said. So then following the presentations, we will submit the written questions to the moderator, Dave Stoltz, for him to give to our speakers. So again, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. And please refer to the program on your chairs to look for upcoming events sponsored by the Carmel Residents Association. Thank you. And now Dave Stoltz. Please welcome Dave Stoltz.
Fabulous job by Barbara. Thank you. And wow, what a turnout. I guess people have an interest in water and more so a little bit small issue, right? And also, I think tonight's topic primarily is about the potential public buyout of California American Water, which is the subject of these two gentlemen. But we will take any question we might have about water in general. And speaking of water, so water in California, just starting kind of big picture, is only about 20% urban use. About 80% is agriculture and environmental releases. So when we're talking about our problems here on the peninsula, we're just part of that 20% of water use in the state. Here on the Monterey Peninsula, back as recently as 1987, we used over 18,000 acre feet as a community. Now an acre foot is about a foot of water on a football field. And that's what it took to serve the population in 1987. In the last 10 years, we've averaged 11,900 acre feet a year. And in the last 5 years, we've averaged 10,400. And last year, we used 9,300, almost half of what we used in 1987 with a bigger population. So we thank you for your conservation efforts, as well as, and the price went up. Well, that results in conservation as well. As one of my colleagues who foresees the lower flow toilets and the waterless urinals and all the technological changes. So we've done very, very well. And in fact, our usage right now, this last year, was the same as 1958. Yes. So here on the Monterey Peninsula in the California American Service Area, about 66% of water use is single and multifamily residential. So the residents use more water than our businesses. The businesses use about 35%, and that includes commercial, industrial, with a very little bit of industrial base and governmental. And there's only 2 golf courses and about to be only 1. So we think of all the golf, but really only 2 of them are using potable water from California American. Now, by comparison, Monterey uses about 33% of all the water, and Carmel, 6.4%. And that's basically because of population and business, not because we're better conservers. Now, the California American system is a system of just under 40,000 connections, about 39,700, and it varies a little bit year by year. And of those, 34,800 are residential. So that's about 88%. So a little bit different, more connections, more customers, but only 66% of the water use. And there's 4,200 commercial, governmental, and industrial connections. Where does our water come from? Right now, it's about 7,000 acre feet from the Carmel River, and about 2,000 acre feet from the seaside groundwater basin. So about 75% from the river, about 22% from the groundwater basin, and the other 3% is basically Sand City Desal right now, the little Desal Plant in Sand City, and other projects that may produce water. And I include in the Carmel River what we call aquifer storage and recovery. So we get water in the winter when the river's flowing, we put it in the ground, we take it back out, and the river's flowing as well. Well, how much of this needs to be replaced? Those of you in the know that we've had an adjudicated groundwater basin. So the courts came in and said you need to reduce your withdrawals from the groundwater. And we've had a cease and desist order where the state came in and said you need to reduce your withdrawals from the river. So of last year's 9,300 acre feet, we need to replace about 4,400 acre feet of the above of that. But we also have to have water for peak capacity, July, August, car week. So you need more water for that, fire service. We need additional water for legal lots of record, many of which have been unable to get a meter set through the moratorium even though they were permitted through the environmental and land use process a long time ago. So what we're looking at, where the replacement's going to come from, is about 3,500 acre-feet from the Pure Water Monterey project, which is already under construction, and about 6,200 acre-feet from the Cal-Am desalination plant, where the final environmental impact report is due out in March, and permission to build is expected from the Public Utilities Commission roughly May or June. But I know what you really want to hear about is the potential buyout of Cal-Am and hear from these two gentlemen. So I'll let these fellows talk. But first let me tell you a little bit about the district's role in any buyout, or at least what the initiative that those folks on the Public Water Now side are asking you to do, so you know what the district's purpose would be. So it's basically an initiative to have the voters pass a district law by ordinance. So instead of my board passing a law, you voters pass a law. And we create a district rule that would instruct us, the district, to keywords if and when feasible. So it is implied that there will be some feasibility analysis. It's not just a sure thing. To secure and maintain public ownership of all water infrastructure within our territory. To negotiate or use eminent domain. And within 9 months of passage, complete a written plan on how to do so. So the district has no role in this fight until told to do something. We'll do what the voters tell us to do, or not do what the voters tell us not to do. And with that, I guess you're writing questions. I get one a lot, so if you want to write one down and hand it in, you can later ask why the district hasn't done a feasibility study to date to inform the public. But other than that, let's let these gentlemen inform the public. Coin toss winner George Riley will go first.
Thank you, Dave. And thank you for coming. It's a real pleasure to be here. About 4 years ago we were here, and so we're back. I was just flipping through your nice little gift. Thank you very much, Barbara. I stuck on one quote. One was by Lincoln Steffens, a hero of mine in general. His little quote's in the middle of the book. I have seen the future and it works. So this is not new. It's not new to think about public ownership of the water supply here on the peninsula. The efforts to buy the privately owned water system has been going on for about 80 years. So this is not new. And the people that preceded us had some of the same arguments and some of the same issues back then. According to the research we've been able to do, and Keith Vanderveer has been kind of a historian for much of this stuff, and maybe you may know him. But his history suggests or tells us that there was a major effort to try to buy the water system in the 1930s. There was another effort in 1965. That was the year before Cal-Am bought the system. Cal-Am bought it in 1966. But there was an effort for a public acquisition in '65 because the California Water and Telegraph Company had indicated they would sell. In 1978, there was another community effort. All these are community efforts of some sort to try to buy the system. That was the year, or the few years in that late 70s, where there was a drought. There was some considerable dissatisfaction with how the drought was being treated. Cal-Am was the only player at the time. Most criticism went to Cal-Am, but there was no water system. There was no water district at that time. But in that cycle, the water district got created. So the district itself was the result of a community effort to try to acquire the water system. And the law that was passed for the water district gave it all the authorities and all the jurisdiction to run the water system, acquire the water system, monitor all the issues around it, as well as, which is unique and different from what Cal-Am responsibility is, have the public trust responsibility, the public issue responsibility of sustainability, environmental balance, and a cross-section of responsibility for water and watershed management. It's not just deliver water. It's a broader environmental responsibility. And that's one of the reasons why we're supporting public ownership, is because of the broader responsibility that the public agency has. More recently, in 2005, there was an effort, a modest effort, but the water district itself sponsored. I think it was an opinion or a straw vote survey. It wasn't an action, but there was an election in 2005 which lost. About 1/3 of the population supported that. In 2014 was our effort, our first effort, and of course we lost. Opposing us at that time was almost the entire cross-section of the power structure, elected officials, elected officials in general, not just the water district. Mayors were against us, Sam Farr was against us. We were having a hard time finding support, to be honest with you. But it went to a vote, and CalAm spent about $2.3 or $2.4 million in opposition to our campaign then, and we spent about $120,000. So it was about a 2-to-1, I mean a 20-to-1 imbalance. But we knew that CalAm was going to come on strong, but the vote was only like 45, we lost 45% of the vote. And the anti won, was the CalAm side. Got 55% of the vote. But we thought with the kind of opposition we were facing, the amount of money that was spent against us, the elite of all the political elite there was in this community, essentially, was opposed to us. And yet the public, we struck a chord. We must have struck a chord. Because how did we get 45% of the vote with all that going against us? We just felt like, we called it a victory, and we said we're just going to try again. So that's why we stayed. So Public Water Now was formed about 6 years ago, largely for the 2014 effort. We've been in business ever since as a nonprofit. We're just a small 501c4 board of directors, and we are promoting public ownership for all sorts of reasons. We're convinced that we need the facts. We've done a lot of research, and I'll go into some of the research, I assume, as I get questions and so on, of the kind of information we've gotten from our own research. And we researched CalAm data, CalAm financial reports. We've got a whole boatload of sources that we've looked at. CalAm files district reports with the PUC. We've got several of those. I mean, we've been looking at these for now several years. They file a state report with the PUC. American Water Works files its only annual report. This annual report that goes to all their stockholders. In here are two interesting pieces of information. This is the annual report of American Water Works. One piece of information is that there are about 5 or 6 pages devoted to the Monterey Peninsula in 2 sections. One is kind of a growth-related strategy session, and the other is calling attention to potential shareholders and existing shareholders about dilemmas on the Monterey Peninsula that aren't being resolved. So they call attention to that. The other little bit of information here is that the American Water Works strategy, and it's defined in here, I can just point to it because it's on page 7, has a policy of expansion called tuck-ins. It's a national policy, and they look for small water companies that are less than 10,000 population, and they acquire them. That's their expansion. But the assumption around expansion is that there will be growth in that community somehow, somewhere, sometime in the future. So corporations have a way of their staying power. Once they get in, they can be there for generations. There's no time limit on anything that they do. So once they have a foot in a community, they have the kind of a hold on at least the water side of anything related to economic growth. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. Except it's a profit-making operation. So there's a bias about their point of view, it's a bias about their priorities, it's a bias about what I think is their interest in staying on this community. We're a cash cow to them. We have the highest rates in the country. I won't say rates. We have the highest water bills in the country. And I think their long-term plan is to make sure they're established in this community with Desal in the Fort Ord community so that they have the water ability, the water capability to provide future growth. That's the only future growth there is in this community. So if you take a big picture look, you can see that there's a national policy for tuck-ins that relate to growth around small operations. I think I'm going to exceed my 5 minutes really fast if I haven't already had. And I'll just shut this down and anyway, give the other side a chance.
We have a couple of chairs
5 over here, Barbara.
Three what?
There's 5 over here.
There's 5 over here. Anybody like to step forward and?
There's one here if they want to cross.
Okay, anybody wants to step forward? There's seats up here, about 7 seats. No, okay, fine. Sorry, Kevin.
Standing room only.
Good evening, I'm Kevin Tilden, I work for California American Water, I've met many of you before. Thank you all for coming, it's a great turnout, thank you to Barbara, the CRA, for putting this forum together. There's really very little more important in life than making sure you know both sides of an issue before you sign a petition or vote on an issue, and so I applaud this group for being involved early and making sure you're educated. I want to acknowledge there are some people in the room I know that are in favor of private ownership philosophically or public ownership philosophically no matter what, and it's fine, I don't expect to change your minds, but for the people who are undecided, I do want to offer our side of the story so that you have both sides of the story before you make a decision. Much has been said about our company tonight and over the years. George mentioned the 80-year history of takeovers. I've worked with Caroline for almost 20 years. I was involved in the 05, we almost had on the ballot in 11 and one in 14. But there's a reason that people over 80 years haven't made the decision to do this, and that's because as people looked at the facts and the real costs and how condemnation works in other communities, it didn't make sense. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that tonight. George talked about our tuck-in philosophy for growth, and that is it's no secret, that is what we like to do, is to go to communities nearby where we offer water service. We already have staff and trucks and everything there, and we can then provide water service at a lower rate. In Monterey, over the years, we have purchased the water system in Chular, Toro, Las Palmas wastewater, Garrapatta, we purchased the water system. Those folks had to boil their water for 10 years before we took it over. We took it over, able to give them drinkable water in 2 weeks. So George is exactly right, that is our policy, that's what we want to do, that's how we want to help communities. We don't do unwanted hostile takeovers, we're not going to be pushing ourselves on Fort Ord or anywhere else. We do negotiated sales where there's a willing buyer and a willing seller. We also, though, only sell when we're a willing buyer and a willing seller, and I think everyone knows we're not interested in selling this system or any of our water systems. Our goal is to be a growing company where our employees have more opportunity and we can use the growth to lower costs for our customers and not to be a shrinking company. So one of the things George mentioned was we have the highest, not the highest water rates, but the most expensive water in the United States. And a think tank out of DC did that study, and they chose a particularly high consumption rate. And as you all know, you guys have very steeply tiered rates to encourage conservation. And at that high rate, which does not represent anywhere near a typical customer in Monterey, their facts are true. At the average rate for a person in Monterey right now pays $78 a month. And if you are a Felton customer of ours, where the San Lorenzo Valley Water District took you over 10 years ago, you now pay $107 for that same level of service, that same amount of water. And you pay $45 a month on top of that for the property tax assessment to pay for the takeover. And the rates are going up every year between now and 2022, an additional 70%. There's a rate calculator on the website, you can go check that for yourself. We are unaware of any condemnation of any water district in the United States that resulted in lower rates. So for those of you who think you're doing it for lower rates, I would look very, very carefully at it. I can't predict the future, George can't predict the future, but the past is instructive in this regard. A lot of people criticize our company for, well, how come we had to spend this money on removing the San Clemente Dam? We're spending this much on a Desal Plant, things like that. We had an order to make the San Clemente Dam earthquake safe. That order would have been on, if the city of Monterey owned the system, or the Water Management District, or the city of Seaside, all of them would have had to do that. We found a way to remove the dam, which was far better for the environment. We cooperated with state and local government, the Water Management District, nonprofits, so the cost to our customers was the exact same as the lowest cost solution, but we're doing something much better for the community and the environment. But again, those costs would have been on any water provider, they would have financed it much the same way, and it's not that if someone else ran the system, they wouldn't have to do that. Similarly, we have a state order to find a permanent long-term water supply solution for this community to get out of a moratorium and a cease and desist order. That would fall on any new owner. They would have to pursue the Desal Plant, do other things. So those costs do not go away. Any also water district would be like ours, where most of your costs are fixed. So I heard some people commenting earlier about, Mr. Stoltz speaking about, you reduce your water use, but your bill went up. And that's true. And that's true of almost any utility. Over time, your energy, gas, electric bill, as your consumption's gone down, the price per unit's gone up because, you know, whether you use 10 gallons or 100 gallons a day, it costs the same amount to replace the meter in front of your street and have a new pipe there to deliver the water reliably. And I'm not going to I'm just going to quote from some other agency really quickly if I can find the right page. When Felton did their last rate increase, they just had it here, they had about 43% of their residents object to it. And I think, I predict that in a future campaign, if this qualifies for the ballot, you'll be hearing a lot from those 300 customers in the fall. But here's their question and answer on the Felton and San Lorenzo Valley website. I've been reducing my consumption, but now you're raising rates. That's not fair. San Lorenzo Valley water district customers have done a great job responding to calls for conservation, which were mandatory by the state of California. It seems fundamentally unfair to ask people to use less water and then raise rates. Unfortunately, there are a good number of fixed costs just to keep the pipes, pumps, tanks, and other parts of the water system running that don't change as the amount of water going through them goes down. We need to maintain the system so the water is there for you 24/7, 365. When water volume goes down, some of the fixed costs need to be recovered through water rates. They did it through, in addition to their huge rate increases, they also had a $1 per water unit surcharge during the drought. I did want to also just talk briefly about that if this were to pass, this would be a start of a long process. The initiative passes, there'd be a resolution of necessity, there'd be a feasibility study done, there'd be probably an election on a funding mechanism, there'd be a long lawsuit proving that our company has so badly mismanaged the water system that there's a public necessity to be taken over, which is a very high bar. And if that worked out, then there'd be a future trial on what the value would be. And the value gets us into this question of the feasibility study. Feasibility studies in water systems typically have produced very bad information which people have made bad decisions based on. People in Felton were told it would cost $2 to $2.5 million. It costs 5 times that amount, $13.4 million. So the consulting firms in feasibility studies, they say this is going to be quick, easy, and cheap, and it isn't. And then they get paid 5 times to come back and revise and update the study. But you should know that feasibility studies historically do not produce good information. If you do one, I would urge you as a community to come up with an agreement on what is feasible. Is 300 million feasible? 600 million? 900 million? You should pick a number before you go down that path, because the numbers do escalate, and people, Felton, they started throwing this $2 million number around. Before they knew it, they were getting the county and having people bail them out because the price was so high. So again, I just want to say that I know that for many people this is a philosophical issue. They may have already made up their minds, but for the ones who have not made up their mind, we're going to be spending a lot of time in the next 8 months or so making sure that people know both sides of the sword before they make a decision. And we're here if you have any questions or if you need help or any additional information. Thank you.
Before we turn the meeting now over to our moderator, have you all turned your questions in? If you want to raise your hands if you've got questions. And we'll raise your hands and we'll have them collected. Okay? We hope you have some questions here, guys. Oh, all right. Oh, you got that? Okay, great. Kevin, thank you, George, and here's Dave Fuller.
Wow.
Small book, huh?
Well, thank you all for...
Sorry about that. Sorry about that. We were going to offer George a chance to do, but sorry.
Yeah, that's true.
Briefly, George. Sorry.
Just a brief response. Felton is not the issue. It's Monterey Peninsula. And all the things that he said about Felton, about raising rates, and every water system in the entire country is facing the problem of reduced use through conservation. And the infrastructure requirements are still there. It's like a fire station. You never want to call them, but you always have to have them ready. So water companies are very much like that. But to point at Felton as an example, as a bad example of what's happened, I think you should look exactly in this community as the perfect example of what you don't want. Cal-Am has been doing more to raise your rates and produce less for it than anything you can see in Felton. Felton is replacing their pipes and adding to their capacity, and we're still talking. We're still talking about that. And Cal-Am has raised their rates enormously because of conservation. And they need the revenue. It's pot calling the kettle here. So be careful about what's being said about Felton And nobody's denying that their rates have increased. But look at our rates and what we've gotten for it. So, please, look local.
Well, everybody, you both have good penmanship and great thoughts. Combination. Out there, so. As our guests get settled here. Okay.
George, do you want to sit on the stool?
No, I'm gonna be all right.
And occasionally I will weigh in, but mostly we're going to look to our presenters for their help. And we're going to try to start mostly with the buyout question, since that's been the fundamental question, but there are some rates and other things in here, so we'll touch on all of them. George, you ready to? Sure. Okay, so this question is a question for CalAm. So I appreciate those of you who specified who you want your question to go to. If not, I'll try to judge who to send it to first, and we can always have the second one weigh in. During the Measure O campaign in 2014, it was reported that CalAm spent $2.5 to $3 million, which Kevin mentioned, to defeat the measure. What percent of that came from ratepayers, and what percent came from shareholders? Are these numbers transparently documented somewhere for the public to see, such as a PVC line?
So we didn't spend quite that much, but we won't go over the numbers. First of all, everything you spend politically in California is on the Secretary of State's website. You go and look at campaign committees, and you can still look at the Measure O one. It has not only how much we spent, but how much we spent with each individual vendor, and every method of communication and literature for walkers. It's all out there in great detail. Absolutely none of it came from any money from your customer water bill. If we thought that was a good idea, which we don't, our PUC regulator would not allow that. So we're part of a larger company that operates in many, many states, and we have non-regulated operations in other areas that we have money that doesn't come from customers. We also have money from our shareholders who invest in the company, and that's how these expenses get funded.
Great. Hey.
Dave, would you save all the questions for me too? Thank you.
Can you give us examples of current successful publicly owned water companies? Or I guess we'll throw that to you, and bear in mind there's a little bit of a nomenclature issue here. So what George is espousing is a public agency, not a publicly owned water company. American Water, their parent, is actually a publicly shareholder-owned water company. So I guess we'll let both of you answer this one.
Our recent information comes from 2 cities recently acquiring their water system, their privately held water system. These are public agencies. The city of Missoula, we had them in town about a year ago or less. We had representatives of Ojai, California. Both of those jurisdictions purchased their local water system. Both of them used as a trigger point for the valuation what's called the rate base. The rate base is a calculated number that the PUC has for all private companies. CalAm has one. Both of those were implemented just in 2017, so just a year ago. And both of them ended up with a reduction in rates after the acquisition. So to say that there's no reduction possible, we have 2 examples very recently where they actually implemented a sale. One went through eminent domain, one stopped short of eminent domain. It is a complicated process to go through, and I'm not trying to belittle that whole process at all. And it could become expensive, but it is routine. Public agencies in general have always had the eminent domain power, and there's courts all over the country that have eminent domain experiences, so it's not unusual to do that. In Felton, I think it's a little disingenuous, Felton passed a bond issue for $9 million for their purchase, so to say that they offered $2 million for it, it doesn't even make any sense to me, because they passed a $9 million bond issue. That's the public statement about what we think it's worth. And you never offer more when you start out. You offer less. So to say that they don't offer appropriate amount related to value, it just doesn't even understand the bargaining process.
So I would like the chance to respond. So first of all, in Felton, I still have the power payment supervisor Jeff Almquist did, where he told residents they should expect to pay $2 million. And they started down that path based on that information, which was nowhere near what they ended up paying. They did pass a bond measure for $9 million. As I mentioned, the sales price was $13.4 million. Even then, they didn't have enough money. To the real question though is, are there good public driven water systems? Of course there are, all over in Monterey County, everywhere. The problem is, when you're buying a system like ours, on top of all your operating and daily expenses going to water bill, you're going to have to pay the $500 million or whatever the number is, $1 billion on top of that on your property tax bills, and it's not going to pencil out. And the two George mentioned, Ojai and St. Missoula, those were $11,000 per home for water account and $14,000 per water account when you just divide the sales price by the number of customers. Before you add 30 years of interest onto that, which we'll do at some point, but we haven't yet. So there are very well-run public water systems everywhere. The problem is when you take on the system and then have to pay off the mortgage for it also, it's not economical.
Okay. Public service announcement, any questions about the mayor's support or for or against can be asked of City Council, not here tonight. And any that want to pick on Monterey Peninsula Water Management District can be done at our board meeting. I didn't know it was moderating. Okay. So these two kind of go hand in hand. Cal-Am, Kevin, quoted Felton's water increase to an average of over 100, I don't know if that's a dollar sign, $100 since the takeover. Which tier were you quoting? Tier 1, Tier 2 and 3 would be an increase. Tier 1 would be a decrease. And so the $40 added on to help defray the cost of the bond, which tier? And then there's a second one that's somewhat related. Food and Water Watch did a study on 60,000 gallons annually. What is a Tier 2 bill on the peninsula, not a high-use, high-tier bill?
That was my question. It's a misstatement of fact, and I was trying to correct it. The DC study he's relating to that said it was really high use is 60,000 gallons annually, which is a Tier 2 bill there.
So we'll give Kevin a chance to look at that.
So I do have that on this DC study. They did 60,000 gallons a month, that's true.
A year.
A year. The average customer bars themselves uses 44,400 gallons.
Tier 1?
The average single family residential, so not all that's in Tier 1, but that results in a bill of $78. So the question about Felton, I'm not sure I totally understood it, but we use the same, we compare the same amount of water used, 7 units, use their service charge, their quantity charge, and then that gets you $107. You add on the average $45 a month property tax bill, that takes you $152.
Okay. So I'm seeing some trends here. We've got a number of questions on the Desal Plant and things like that, and we've got a number of questions on rates and charges. So we'll get to those as we move from the public buyout. So Cal-Am has publicly claimed several times that they are not making a profit from the Monterey District system. If that's true, why would Cal-Am not want to sell the system? Kevin, I think that's probably
As George mentioned, our strategy is to grow, not to shrink. What's that? We're committed to the peninsula, we're committed to the 90 families here that depend on us, many of those families worked for us for 2 and 3 generations. We obviously provide water service in about 75 other communities in California. We know this is a unique challenge with the water supply and the rates. But if you look at over the last several years, we had the removal of the San Clemente Dam, we had a previous rate structure that didn't work, we had to build the San City Desal Plant. We've kind of one by one been taking off the problems off our list. And getting the desal approved, which we think the ER out will be in about 6 weeks, is the next one on the list, and we're going to get there.
okay. Do you want to weigh in?
Well, I want to weigh in a little bit on whether you're losing money or not. we've looked at your finances. As I said, we've looked at your reports that you filed with the PUC, even your SEC reports. I mean, we've looked at all sorts of things. And I just want to point out this chart briefly. Dave, I'm going to pull on this card just a little bit. Okay. I just wanted to point out this chart. This is a summary of the financial information that CalAm submitted to the PUC in 2016. They took in about $60 million, so this is $60 million chart. Half of it is for existing staff, existing operations, chemical trucks, whatever they do here. This is local operation. This would stay, all employees would stay. If it's publicly owned, the assumption is all these employees would stay and continue under a new paycheck title. There's about 15% of the money goes out of our community, but for services that relate to the water, like the call center, which is in Illinois, billing centers and so on. And that leaves our community. What we're saying is this money can come back into the community and create local jobs, because why should we spend our money in Sacramento or Illinois when we can do the same job here with our people? The other two pieces of the chart here are corporate taxes and profit. Now, CalAm would never admit that they're making 26% profit. And most people in this room would probably not believe it. But from the math that's submitted by CalAm, and all we did is add and subtract. This is identified in their reports, this is identified in their reports, this is identified in their reports, and then this is identified in their report. So if you start with 60 million, and you subtract this and this and this is the unaccounted for revenue that goes somewhere. We call it profit. They will call it maybe revenue from sales. They may call it net operating reserve or something. But the point is, they've collected this much. They only account for this much. Where does this go? It leaves our community for sure. And I want to make one other comment about renting versus buying. Kevin says, on top of your bill, then you have to add to the cost of purchasing CalAm. Not true. If you're a renter and you want to buy a house, how long do you pay your rent after you buy your house? Or when do you stop paying rent and start paying your mortgage? That's the difference we're talking about. This is money we pay to an absentee landlord, CalAm or American Water Works. I will wrap it up in 12 seconds. Instead of paying CalAm for absentee costs, we can pay the bond off. This is our mortgage. Right now it's rent money. Same amount in your bill can go to the mortgage, which buys the company.
So I'll just say we have tried very hard to do the math and figure out where the was $14 million, now $60 million profit comes from. The PUC authorized us a $7 million profit in this community. We don't usually earn that much until we offer the opportunity to earn up to that much. We cannot replicate that math. Maybe George can help us out later with it. But you start looking at statewide numbers, and in most of the PUC reports, they're not divided out just to district. So if you did it prorated by number of customers or things like that, you could end up with the wrong number. We can't figure out how we got the numbers. So.
And a follow-up or corollary to the not making money in the Monterey district, someone also asked, how is this possible if our bills are the highest in the country? So it's really the same answers. And keep in mind, fixed costs are very, very high also. So some of you went through what's called the WRAM. The cost of delivering water, and it was spoken in the presentation, it's about 90% fixed. And the rate structure until recently was 15% fixed. And so you're trying to collect 75% of fixed costs through a variable charge. And so when people conserve, it gets very hard to do. But the PUC, the Public Utilities Commission, says you're entitled to recovery of fixed costs. And so that's where the complaining, the sadness came from, which is, I try harder to save water better, and it costs me more. Okay, let's take a look at this one. If eminent domain happens and fails, we'll give you this one, Kevin. Who is responsible for all of the legal fees?
So a couple, I think what this means is the trial. If we have an election and we'll do our cost, they'll do theirs, and then if we win, we'll go away. If we then go to the court,
While we're on that, we actually pay for the election. So
the district pays for expenses and ballots and all, right?
Yeah, so the campaign, they'll each have their own.
I think what this is getting at is if it goes forward if there's a right to take trial, I mentioned earlier, they would have to prove we've so badly mismanaged our business that there's a public necessity that us being taken over. And if you look at our company as a whole, our expertise in engineering, desalination, emerging contaminants, it's going to be a pretty high bar for someone to prove that about our company. And so we go to that court case and our company prevails. Whoever has filed the condemnation lawsuit against us, whether it's the Water Management District or someone else, pays all of their court fees, all their lawyer fees, all of our court fees, all of our lawyer fees. So this just recently happened in the city of Claremont in Southern California. And the city of Claremont owed Golden State Water, I think, $6 or $8 million. And they couldn't pay it until they came to an agreement that if the city of Claremont just didn't try and take them over for some period of time, they would only collect interest. But the interesting what they say is there's no free look. If you want to start down this path, city of Claremont ended up having no success taking over the water agency and $15 or $16 million in bills to go. So.
Can I add? This is an example of the he said, she said dilemma that we're in. Because we do research off of their numbers, and they discount the fact that it's their numbers or that we've done it right. So this is the back and forth that you're going to get the whole campaign, all through, until election day. But what we're trying to do is get the facts, and we want the facts generated by an agency that has credibility in how they generate things and what kind of approach they would take to consultants. And that's why this is on the ballot. We're promoting simply get the facts. Now, we do have a goal of public ownership down the road, and we're convinced that the evidence that would come from a cost-benefit analysis would show public ownership as an advantage. We're convinced of that, or we wouldn't even be doing this. But first step is getting the facts. So what we're asking people to do is sign a petition, get it on the ballot, have a vote, and succeed on that election. Then get the facts from a professional structure of what it looks like. Then we will know what the comparisons are. Right now, it's he said, she said. And we're convinced we're right, and they're convinced they're right.
And we're down to about our last two, specifically about the buyout, and I think this one was answered when George did his pie chart, and it was addressed to Public Water now, and it's about how can you be sure that it's going to be less expensive, what cost will be less. So I think you've answered that one. How much money does CalAm collect on average annually? And I would assume that means from the Monterey District. It's about 60 million.
You can use my chart.
Well, just a very, I think the revenue requirement here has been about 54 million recently, and it's approaching 60. Yeah. And the corollary, and this has already been discussed, is how much of that stays local, and how much of the DC area.
So it's important to note that we do pay taxes, which a public agency wouldn't. So those expenses would go away. Might lower your water bill some, but it's also funds that go away from local schools and governments and things like that.
Okay, so now let's move to some things that are a little bit veiled, still related to the buyout. What are your costs, what are your rates, and so forth. It's a given that much of CalAm's costs are fixed. We just talked about this one. However, during the drought, what costs did CalAm cut?
Right. So like Dave mentioned, 95% of the costs are fixed. We constantly look for ways to save money. One of the Dave and I were talking about earlier, we have a whole department that looks at are we getting the best deal on our fleet contracts or cell phone contracts, things like that. We did not cut any positions in the Monterey District or statewide during the drought. We did not refill some as quickly as we would have otherwise that were vacated by someone resigning or moving on or illness or whatever. We did not cut positions. Like I said, even if we were able to, we're looking at 5% of your water bill, not the 95%.
Now, Kevin wears many hats. He's vice president of external affairs, business performance, mergers and acquisitions, something else.
That's about it.
But he's not in the rate department. So we're going to cut him some slack. But with President Trump's tax cut, how will CalAm's rates go down, and will there be a return to the shareholders?
So that's a really interesting question, and we're working with the PUC right now to find out the answer. But you might have seen a lot of companies, because of the tax cut, gave $1,000 bonuses to employees and things like that. Our taxes are just like our expenses for chemicals or payroll. those get passed right on to customers. So to the extent that our taxes go from 35% to 22%, that will be a savings that the customers will see. So the question before the PUC is, do we just collect that money and next time we go in to true things up, do they say, okay, we're gonna have a little rate increase? Or do they put a credit on your bill starting as soon as we can, saying here's your savings from the tax cut job at TCGA. So we don't know yet. You will reap the savings. We don't know whether it'll be in the form of a credit on a bill or just true it up to that rate, next rate.
I don't know if CalAM's just popular, but there's a lot of questions for it. So, increased customer service advertising that promotes the company can be designated as conservation outreach. Did CalAM increase its outreach at the end of 2017 to promote conservation and its presence in the community? And was that outreach billed to customers?
So I actually don't know what outreach that's referring to. We have a lot of conservation outreach we do with the district. We did one mailer at the end of the year that I think was elective that we paid for. But I couldn't tell you exactly without knowing more.
Yeah, I think there's been some full-page ads about water-wise house calls and things like that. I don't know if there's a mailer. To CalAM, in your last rate-based mailing, probably rate-case mailing, you claim residents were charged 46
million for the current service.
Yeah, 46 million for the current service. Mr. Stoltz reported 34,800 residents or residential connections. You claim the average bill is $78 times 12 months times 34. Okay, we can do a math. Equals 32,572 million. So 46 million is residential revenue. What average would be that average would be an average of 110 per month. So defend your math.
Well, so Mr. Stoltz did this when he talked earlier about the portion of our customers that are non-residential business and what portion of the water they use. And so that's where that difference comes in.
I wrote that question. Taking from the rate base that when we had the PUC meeting a couple months ago, it was 46 million for residents only. So that number is what what you collect from residents, and you divide it out, divide by 12, divided by 34,000, it comes out to $110. That's average. That's the definition of average.
So I know the answer to that is that I think it's between a median and an average. I'm not the rates department, but our average customer is not, it's not that we have, most people pay 78 and some pay 58 and some pay 88. Is we have some people paying $20,000 a month and.
Right. So there's a difference between mean and median,
Right.
And it's not the median, the middle point, it's what's the average. Anyway, that's my question.
Now, I see that George has been very opportunistic and has handed out what just went out as a mailer. So I'd like to think this was a question for George, but it's really a question for Kevin. How much money is spent on excessive mailings and salaries to executives in New Jersey, etc.? And how about PVC expenses?
So the PUC expenses are a surcharge on your bill. I think it's going from 1.7 to 1.4%, but it's on your bill. You can look and see that, so don't quote me on that. Salaries in New Jersey, the top handful of people that you read about in the annual report that are the high earners of the company, you don't pay any of their salaries or expenses. Everyone, other people you do, but it's engineering, water quality, it's people that we're working with them to get things to benefit this community. Mailings, they approved in the rate case outreach for conservation and other things that are billed to customers. There's other things we choose to do that don't affect your bill. If this qualifies for the ballot, you're going to be seeing a lot of mail.
Are we going to be paying for it?
No. So it's a Barbara Day.
We are going to take some questions from the floor at the end. Just try to get through these. This multi-tiered 6-question card, I'm sorry, we can't do them all.
Sorry, that's mine. Some of them?
I'll do a couple of them.
Yes.
What does it cost to flush a toilet?
Yes.
If you have a 1.6 gallon flush, it probably costs you between 0.6 and 0.8 cents. I don't know.
Depends on what tier you're in.
Yeah. How can we get rid of the tiered rates? So Once the final water supply solution is done, they will probably shift to a less steeply tiered block rate structure, so there may be fewer tiers and not as steep of tiers. But until that happens, the conservation-inducing tiers that we have will remain because it's a concession to the state board to maintain as low unlawful diversions.
If we
as
own
possible.
this, would we be subject to the tier rate?
Public
Utilities
agencies
have
have tiered rates.
Public companies?
Public
ownership?
Yeah, like Los Angeles Department of
No, I mean,
Water
would
and Power.
we be here?
Sure,
Yeah.
probably.
Yeah, you have a block rate structure. It'd be different.
That's why I drink whiskey, I don't drink water.
Can you explain the difference between water bills in Marina and Cal-Am?
I can't today, I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, I don't have a copy of that in front of me. We did a rate study in July of this past year, and we did the comparative rates, not just rates, but the total cost of the bill. Yeah, and we put this out, and what we try to do is do our research, stand behind our research, defend our research, and cite the sources of our research, so that you can do the same check that we did, so that you're the check on us, but we're the check on ourselves as well, because we're not making anything up. But this is the rate chart. The big red column is Cal-Am's rate, which is almost or double of what Marine Coast Water District rates are, and they have two different systems. Anyway, it's well above both of those. And it's well above the Felton rate. Felton rate's the little blue one on the right, and that's the water charge.
Is that, this is as of June 17, so it's not Felton's rates today. That is of June 17.
Yeah, and it's always, you know, if anybody can accuse, you know, a week later it's old news or something. I want to just remind you, no matter how many questions you have about how much is this rate and how much is that and how much do they spend and so on, I just want you to not forget the performance we've had from Cal-Am over the last 15 or so years. And I don't know if you're going to get a question for it, but I'm just going to take a minute if I can, unless you drag me off. They have overdrafted the Carmel River. They have overdrafted the Seaside Basin. They have, now they're in Marina, without permission from Marina, trying to use their water to solve our problem. So what we've gotten from their billing to us and their money that they take, we've gotten poor performance. That's one of our main reasons why we're interested in public ownership. We think they've had 50 or 60 years in the saddle.
Right.
It's time to consider a change. We think it ought to be an absolute change, but until we get the data, until we get a public discussion on the actual facts around the takeover, then we're stuck until we get the facts. But we know what we believe, and we know what the performance has been in the past. And we think we deserve a lot better.
And to the person who wrote that question, the secondary question about why the pipe didn't get replaced, I don't think we're going to answer here, and neither of our speakers are going to walk. I hear the Cal-Am is asking currently for a 14% rate increase from the CPC. What is this for? That would be the general rate.
So the PUC has put all water companies like ours on a schedule where you go in once every 3 years for a rate increase. What they had 10 years ago or maybe more was some companies weren't going in and they were over-earning. They were earning a very big return and they would just not go. And the PUC said that's not okay. You know, we want to be able to make sure you're earning a reasonable return or more. There are also companies that would stay out for too long, and they'd have to go in and ask for a huge rate increase. And usually that followed an economic cycle, so that all these companies would be fine with the PUC at the same time, restrict their workload. So they came up with this plan where they stagger the companies. You file a rate case every 3 years. It takes us 18 months to put it together. It takes them 18 months to review it. We filed a rate case that should have gone into effect January 1st. It would cover the years 2018, 19, and 20. The PUC is late in their decision on that. We don't have it yet. The average impact here was about 14%. Typically, the PUC approves a third or a half of what we ask for. So we don't know what that'll be under bill and when it'll be, but we'll probably have some news from the PUC.
Correction. You filed for a 23% rate increase, 14% in the first year. So it's a 23% rate increase.
So as with the first year, in the future years, the PUC is, I'm not aware of them ever giving utility anything now.
Okay, this one's great. I need to share it with you. I am a dentist, So using, it's not Cal-Am logic, using PUC logic, should I charge my patients when they prevent tooth decay?
Yeah, me too.
And we're not going to answer the question of the salaries of the top 4 managers of Cal-Am in the Monterey District. Although, George, I think you have that information. I don't think you have it on you, but...
Our salaries are competitive with other water districts. They're not super generous. We don't have CalPERS type pensions. We have a 401k. No one's getting rich in the water utility.
I think in my question and answer, should I drill them or not?
I think you should. All right, this is clear. So now we're getting into some projects, both the new proposed desal facility and some other things. There's a question on an older project. Kevin, you stated that Cal-Am built the Sand City desal. Is that true?
We did build it. The city of Sand City owns it. We lease it from them. We lease the water from it, but we were involved in design, build, and operation.
Very good.
I would say until, just so people don't know, until a little over a year ago, our company had the most experience in desalination in the U.S. and ran the largest desalination plant in the U.S. In Tampa Bay, Florida. Since the plant opened in Carlsbad, that is much bigger.
That's our reminder. We have about 10 minutes, and then Barbara can wrap it up. We'll try to get through some of these. Some of these questions are going to be a little challenging, and I'll try to use some judgment. George, they're asking a lot of Cal-Am, but you can weigh in whenever. Why has it been more than 20 years since the 1995 CDO ordered a new supply, and Cal-Am still has not yet approved? Haven't approved the project.
So I could talk all night about that, but I'll give you guys a very highlights. As you know, the Cal-Am pursued a dam before I was involved in this. Then the district pursued a dam. Then Fred Keeley, the assembly member, passed a law saying we had to have a contingency plan. Then we were going to build open ocean intake desal at Moss Landing. Then the state made it clear that open ocean intake desal would probably never be approved in this area again. Then we went to the regional desal plant where there was a, I don't know, indictment or
political practice,
there was a
violation.
nothing involved in our company. That project did not move forward, and so now here we are. So we would have loved it if we'd gotten it in finish line quicker.
Except if I can just add a little bit. All those projects that were not completed, Cal-Am made an investment. Cal-Am went to the PUC and sought reimbursement of those investments. Those investments were in the neighborhood of $34 million. The PUC approved every penny of that investment back on the ratepayers. Not one penny went to the shareholders. So a failed project, or an incomplete project, or an abandoned project, whatever it was not completed, and we bore the entire cost of every dollar that was spent on it. And the PUC is one of our problems. It's not just Cal-Am, it's the PUC as well, because they're together on so many issues. And their policy is stick it to the ratepayer. Because of 3 different opportunities and 3 different projects and 3 different abandoned projects, not one penny was charged to the stockholders.
I'd say 2 things. One is, many people in our company industry think the PUC's policy is to stick it to the company. So I guess if both of your parties or your enemies, you must be being somewhat of a fair regulator. But everything George said about the previous projects and those expenses being borne by customers is absolutely true. And if this water system was owned by the Water Management District or anyone else, that would be true also. If there's a future owner of this company that's different than ours, they're not going to have a secret bag of money somewhere to solve problems and not have customers pay their bills.
Well, when I was a kid, 1970, our Secretary of State died. This is an Illinois story. And they found $800,000 of bills and shoeboxes in his closet. So I'm not saying we do or we don't, but...
But let me just back up on one thing that Kevin said, that the Water Management District has the same problem. I don't think that's true, because the Water Management District plays well in the sandbox. Cal-Am does not. Every project that Cal-Am hasn't been involved in has been some form of a partnership that has failed. And Cal-Am is the one that pulled the plug. The partners didn't pull the plug. Cal-Am pulled the plug. So
That's just simply not true.
I
We did
just-
Desal Plant, they just pulled the plug.
I would expect more if the leadership were local as opposed to absentee.
Okay, we're gonna try to do some rapid fire here, and I am reminded that my Rock'em Sock'em Robot toy has long since passed, so you guys make me feel good about my childhood. How much is the Cal-Am slant well costing? I'm not sure we have the answer for that.
I do.
Do you?
The first estimate was 4 million. It's now in excess of 20 million. And that's from Cal-Am reports.
Good. George, how much will our costs go up with the Cross Monterey pipeline and Pure Water Monterey and Desal? So I think that's the total. I'm talking 43% to current, but that's ignoring general rate case increases and other things.
Yeah. Your future bills are going to be hefty because of the water supply issues that are now under construction. All the pipes, whatever the desal or whatever the source water is, none of that's in your bills yet. But it's coming, and bills are going to go up. But you should expect that anyway. It's just how can we moderate that increase with local management or better management or more attention to some things, local leadership basically, compared to absentee leadership.
Dave, I'd like to wrap up by 10:15.
Absolutely. We're in pretty good shape on that. There were a couple hands went up earlier. Are there going to be questions from the floor? There's 1, 2, so we'll hold on to those 2. All right. There's 2 questions about Cal-Am's water rights in the CMEX area. Do you have the ability to prove you have water rights for groundwater?
Yeah, the PUC and the State Water Resources Control Board spent months studying this. The outcome was that they don't have appropriate water rights. It's the ocean. We're allowed to use what we want. We do these monitoring wells in addition to test wells, see how much of it we're pulling is non-ocean water. And the amount that is non-ocean water, we are producing more water that will reimburse that amount with. The saline brackish water that we're pulling is not usable for irrigation or anything else, and we're replacing with water that's pure and better and more usable.
That issue has not been resolved yet.
Well, I think the State Board and the PUC disagree.
There's been no decision on that.
Okay. As I said, we don't need a decision, but
There
may disagree.
And as your moderator, I will moderate on this one. There are parties who claim that they do not have water rights. There are parties who claim they do have water rights. And I think George's answer is probably correct in that you can read a document and say, oh, they have water rights, and you can see a filing from someone else and they say they don't. It will be resolved. Why is Cal-Am's desal cost so much higher than other desals in Southern California? I don't think we can make that case. We're talking about an all-in with other features, about a $302 million project. The Carlsbad Desal Plant, which is bigger, was a $1 billion project. The cost of water is comparable based on the scale or the size of the project. So
Also, some people look at just the cost of the plant, not the cost plant with the associated pipeline.
yeah. Why are you pursuing experimental slant wells instead of a conventional water collection system?
So we did one slant well, and it's been in operation for more than 2 years. We post the results of that on the internet every week. It's working out fabulously. Test wells, slant wells have never been used for desalination on an ocean. They have been used in many, many other applications for dozens of years and have been very successful. The only difference is you go straight down or you go at an angle. There's no other change in the design or anything else. The reason we were pursuing that is because the state policy, ocean policy, favors subsurface intake rather than open ocean intake and having those out under the ocean floor.
Now, I apologize to the 3 folks. Did you have a quick?
I just want to say that public water now, we advocate lowest cost water. Now, there are a lot of ways to get there, but the desal and slant well is the supply of last resort. It's the most expensive supply you can have. Anywhere in the world, it's the most expensive supply. What we've been advocating for all along is what alternatives exist short of that. And we should exhaust those every possible way we can before we invest in the most expensive solution there is.
Okay, so the last one, only because this person did so much preparation to pre-type it out and bring it. I'm not sure we'll have an answer. Please name a landowner that holds existing groundwater rights adjacent to your slant well, not the Farm Bureau, who owns no property, that has publicly supported Cal-Am's efforts to take water out of the Salinas Valley in violation of state law.
Say Carmel, I would.
The Salinas Valley Coalition and Farm Bureau, who represent most of those landowners, are in some very strong support of our project. I do not know an individual farmer in that area that is a huge fan, but I don't know any that's a huge opponent either.
That's a good enough response. So there's 3 cards that we're not going to get to because we agreed at the outset to take a couple from the floor, so we'll start with you.
I'm going to speak as a residential owner. I have an acre and a half of land. I have a well. I use no Cal-Am for any of my irrigation. In fact, I really cut back on that because of our drought. There are 2 people in the household. We leave for a month. I come home and the bill is, our original bill was 29 something a month. Went up to 40 something. The actual water use is like $12.95. I am now paying $149. And we weren't even there for a month.
And
Why?
did your water consumption change? Did you have a leak or anything? Or?
No leaks, no nothing. This is just, and this is the smart, whatever that they do, you know, they don't come out and read the meter, it's all the smart thing. It went up like $4.
please?
Yes, so the question was, this is a residential homeowner who previously paid roughly what for Cal-Am?
We paid anywhere between $39 and $40.
$39, $40.
She has her own well.
Has her own well for irrigation and left town for a month, and yet her bill is now over 100 and...
Well, it went up for $4 more. It was up at $149. It was $144 prior.
144. So the rising bill, and yet she's away, not consuming water any differently than before. That's the question.
And there's nothing wrong. I mean, we've had her come out and check.
You had a water rights house call.
Everything
Right.
was great.
So
We don't flush the toilet.
Because yellow, let it mellow, et cetera.
Are you showering together?
We may be old, we ain't dead.
Is there an answer to this we need to?
I don't think so. So
yeah, without seeing your bill, but if you had a water rights house call and there's no leaks, then you gotta
My
have
question is, it's not only me, it's everyone in the neighborhood. All these have been increased.
well, so recently in March
What
there
are we
was
paying for?
yeah. So there is what's called the revenue adjustment mechanism for really 6 years of under collections, and then that came on the bills, and so that's the
No, we're paying for water we did not use.
And-
We're paying for
yes.
their, because they didn't make the money, because we
paying the
weren't
fixed
using the
costs that
water.
they.
as you would a public agency code.
Yeah, let's make it very honest.
So there's a question back here, gentlemen.
So if this goes through and passes and it's taken over, would the new employees that work, would they become civil service employees, thereby encumbering all of us to pay attention and all
With pension
that?
and OPEB and line, yeah.
And have to follow the new law that just was passed where they now have to pay prevailing wage on everything, which might exceed what your employees are getting?
Well, actually, the employee pay levels are roughly comparable. There are benefits in the private sector as well. And I know in Missoula's case, they attempted to balance those. It's way too early to even ask that question. They don't even have the full set of signatures collected to get it on the ballot, let alone the votes to make it happen. But that would be something that would be looked at. But yes, they would become public employees with pension liabilities.
Kind of like Caltrans?
Post, yeah, but they would all be
Like
post,
warm engine district, well,
post pension reform, so they wouldn't be at the same levels as many of the current employees who preceded the pension.
Missoula made a transition at comparable wages and benefits. They didn't say exactly, they just said comparable. And that's how Missoula did it. And they were about the same size as we are today.
Well, that's all we have time for. Sorry, folks. Those were the 2 hands that went up originally, and you were trying to get in an extra one.
We'll be around if people have questions.
Thank you all for being here tonight, putting some marvelous questions, and we appreciate the speakers. Please stay for a glass of wine and help us back earlier. Thank you.